So we can start.
Yes.
Okay, so I will. This is the last lesson. So I will present two subjects. One is introducing new techniques in the inverse fixing problem for period analysis. And these new techniques are linked with Nash theory of the theory of arc space, Nash arc space, sorry. Then I will talk a little bit about the Kahn Hirota Kimura system, discrete system, or discretization, if you like, which looks well adapted to quadratic planar vector fields. Okay, so let us begin with this subject. So this is first an introduction on what is Hilbert's fixing problem on a period annulus. Then the notion of cyclicity. Then one parameter unfoldings which maximize the cyclicity. Description of the bifurcation function of a one parameter unfolding. And one parameter perturbations as arcs on singular varieties. And then I will successively explain the blow-up of an ideal and its space of arcs, and then discuss essentially the fundamental application to quadratic centers and the notion of Iliev essential perturbations, and then some conclusion on perspectives. Okay, so in full generality, this article or this talk deals with bifurcation theory of polynomial planar vector field x lambda depending of a set of parameters, say lambda 1, lambda n, in this set of parameters that I denote as capital of lambda. So we have some center set of vector fields, which is well, in the family x lambda, then we look at those vector fields such that they have a center at the origin. Then this is, in general, in many examples, an affine algebraic variety defined by an ideal in the ring of polynomials in lambda. And this ideal is the so-called Banting ideal associated to the family. Okay, so first of all, Hilbert's fixing problem on the period annulus. What we call a period annulus, pi for a polynomial planar vector fields x lambda 0, we fix here the parameter lambda equal to lambda 0. It is a union of periodic orbits of x lambda 0, which is homeomorphic to the standard annulus S1 cross the segment 0, 1 without the extremities. So the image of each periodic orbit being a circle. Now we consider an unfolding x lambda of x lambda 0, which depends on finitely many parameters, lambda 1, lambda n. And we assume that lambda belongs to a small ball centered at 0 in the parameter space. So this is a local situation near the singularity, which is the center or the origin of the coordinates. The infinitesimal 16 inverse problem on the period annulus is to find a uniform bound in lambda on the number of limit cycles of x lambda, which tend to pi as lambda tends to lambda 0. The precise meaning of this is encoded in the notion of cyclicity, which we define below. Possible example, studying, for instance, quadratic planar vector fields with 4 limit cycles, quadratic perturbations of Q4 center, quadratic perturbations of double centers. This is a subject that I mentioned already with the contribution with Pechin, and also cubic perturbation of cubic centers is a possible nice subject. Okay, so assume that we have an open cross section to the vector field on the open set pi. And for lambda close to lambda 0, then x lambda remains transversal to sigma. And there is an analytic first return map, P of lambda, which is the first return map. And the limit cycles of x lambda are in one-to-one correspondence with the fixed points of the analytic first return map by P of lambda, and hence with the zeros of the displacement function, which is obtained by subtracting IH to this P lambda of H, so that the zeros of the displacement function are naturally associated with the limit cycles which can be born by deformation. Okay, so we have the coefficients. We expand this function in an analytic series in H, and we have the coefficients Fk of lambda. So the infinitesimal 16 inverse problem on the period annulus asks alternatively to find a uniform bound on the number of fixed points of the first return map, which is uniform in lambda. And in this context, will belong to some sufficiently small neighborhood of a given lambda 0, which belongs to the center set. So the problem which we consider should not be confused with the study of the displacement function on the closed period annulus. You take the closure of the open period annulus, where in fact the study of fx lambda h lambda in the neighborhood of the polycycle needs specific techniques like Dulac series and so on. So we don't consider this this type of limits. Also, the techniques of slow-fight manifold, then we don't speak at all on this subject in this talk. And we know that they need also some special techniques like this singular integral. Okay. Cyclicity. What is the cyclicity? So for an arbitrary compact set K, we define the cyclicity as the maximal number of limit cycles of the vector field which tends to K as lambda tends to lambda 0. This allows to define the cyclicity of the open period annulus by taking the soup over all the arbitrary compact set. Alternatively, let sigma be a cross-section to pi, P of lambda the first return map, and the corresponding displacement map, P of lambda minus I identity. Then the limit cycles of x lambda are associated to the isolated points of the fibers pi inverse of lambda of this mapping. X lambda goes to lambda, restricted to this set. The x lambda, which are x is in the cross section, lambda is in the parameter set. The cyclicity of a compact is then the maximum number of isolated zero of the displacement map when lambda tends to 0. There is a conjectural finiteness of the cyclicity of period annuli, closed or open, which is a largely open problem. And in fact, in all this talk, we assume a priori that this cyclicity is finite. We need to assume it. Okay, so now, given an analytic family of vector fields which depends on one parameter, so that means in the parameter space, say it is given by a curve, you see, an analytic arc parameterized by epsilon, but it is an arc which is traced in the parameter space lambda. You have an induced family of vector fields, x lambda epsilon. It's sure that the cyclicity along this path exists and is smaller than the larger cyclicity here, which is the total cyclicity for all element of X lambda. Then at first sight, it is restrictive to study only one parameter deformations or arcs in the parameter space. But we have this following theorem. By the way, I'm talking about an article which was written with Lubomir Gavrilov and Dongmei Xiao. Under the finiteness condition, there exists always an analytic arc such that the cyclicity, maximal cyclicity, can be actually realized by the arc. So I don't explain the proof, but it belongs to, in some sense, some standard techniques of analytic geometry. Okay. Okay. So yes. Okay. So the main question addressed in our article is about how to construct all one parameter deformations or arcs in the parameter space. As far as we are interested in cyclicity, it is clear that most of the one parameter deformations are redundant. To avoid redundancy, we shall consider only essential deformations. And moreover, we shall organize them in algebraic families of one parameter deformations. So the key observation is that to parameterize this family of arcs, we should use the associated bifurcation functions. Okay, so let us come to the bifurcation function of a one parameter unfolding. So given a one parameter analytic unfolding, x epsilon, so it depends only on one parameter, of the vector field with a center, that is to say perturbation of x0. So the displacement function associated to x epsilon can be developed in a power series in epsilon, like this. And these terms are called the bifurcation, the leading term. So here you have the first term which appears, which is not zero. This is what we call the leading term. And we call it also the bifurcation function, or the k order Melnikov function, if I is equal to k. The first non-zero is equal to k. You see that I have written here the sum from I equal to k to plus infinity. Okay, let sigma now be a global section of the period annulus pi. The displacement function is defined on an open, relatively compact subset depending on epsilon. So an important feature of MK is that in contrast to F, it can be defined on the whole open interval and it is analytic on it. So possible bifurcation of unit cycles from the ovals of X0 correspond to zeros of the displacement function and hence to zeros of the bifurcation function MK or sigma. Thus, if MK is associated to a one parameter unfolding, maximizing the cyclicity of pi with respect to x lambda, then the zeros of MK on sigma provide an upper bound to this cyclicity. To solve the infinitesimal 16 Hilbert problem on the open period annulus amounts to study the zeros of all bifurcation functions associated to arcs. Okay. So given a perturbation x epsilon, we associate a bifurcation function. To avoid redundancy, we parameterize perturbations by bifurcation functions and ask for families of perturbation which produce all possible bifurcation functions. Such remarkable families of perturbation, if it exists, were called essential by Iliev and studied in detail in the quadratic case. Our approach fits into the Nash theory of arcs on singular varieties. The perturbation x epsilon becomes an arc on the blow-up of the Bantin ideal related to the period annulus pi. The bifurcation functions are identified to the exceptional divisor of the blow-up, and the Iliev essential perturbations turned out to be special irreducible components of the associated Nash space of arcs. Okay, so let us, this is actually the introduction to this part 2, where we have the notion of blow-up of the Bottin ideal, and it's a space of arcs. Okay, so let I be an ideal in polynomial ring with complex coefficients, and let me assume that it is generated by the polynomial V1 Vn. Okay, so this is an ideal, and we can first of all look at the zero set, which is the set of lambda, so that all the generators vanish at this value of lambda. Okay, so this is 0 of I. Now, what is the blow-up of this ideal? It is not denoted BL, BI, for I is this ideal, of Cn. And it is, in fact, contained in Cn cross Pn minus 1. This is a blow-up with center I. So you take the graph of the mapping, which goes from Cn minus Z, so Z is the zero set, and goes to Pn minus 1, which is lambda goes to the point on the projective space, excuse me, these are now homogeneous coordinates, computed at where you replace the variables by V1 of lambda, Vn of lambda. And this has a projection on the first factor, of course. Here, so this is the projectivization of the vector. We say that so this is this set, but this set is not Zariski closed because there is a hole, if you like, which is Z. Then you take the Zariski closure of this. So this is a well-defined set. This is so we say that there is a map pi, which is a blow-up map with center at I. In this situation, pi is a map, which is here, BICN to CN. And E is P inverse of Z is the exceptional locus. So here, Z and E are algebraic varieties, which are not necessarily smooth manifolds. For every lambda, we denote the fiber of E over lambda, and the fiber is a projective variety. Okay. So maybe I switch this case and I go to the Nash space of arcs, which is the main tool. When we have an algebraic variety, possibly singular, a formal arc is a parameterized formal curve. Epsilon goes to alpha epsilon, which where this path is contained in X. So the set of k-jets of such arcs is an algebraic variety, and there is a canonical projection from xi to xj when I is larger than j, because when you have the i-jet, if I is larger than j, then you can cut until j, and you have this, it defines you a canonical projection of the set of i-jets to the set of jet sets. And we can take the projective limit. So it is a construction which was used a lot by Grothendieck. So this is not exactly an algebraic variety, but it is so-called pro-algebraic. So it's the space of arcs. You have to think that it has infinitely many coordinates, yes. But in fact, you consider when you truncate, then it depends only on finitely many parameters or variables. And so in some sense, what is nice is that the finiteness theorem, which can be easily obtained in the usual algebraic varieties, then they still exist in this context of so-called pro-algebraic variety. Okay, so let's X singular be the singular locus of X, the algebraic variety, or more generally, near algebraic subset of X. So a formal arc centered at, so centered means it begins at, so centered at X thing is a parameterized formal curve, so that for epsilon equals 0, alpha of 0 belongs to the singular set. The space of all such formal arcs is a pro-algebraic variety, and it is denoted like this: arc of X with X singular. In this section, we take X is the blow-up of Cn, and E is the exceptional locus of the blow-up. Okay, and so general arc is not contained in E, so it can be described by its projection on the lambda plane and vice versa. Of course, the topology on the space of arcs is the one induced by the topology on the space of arcs on Bi of Cn. Okay, so the arc epsilon goes to lambda epsilon is a formal parameterized curve on Cn, which meets the zero locus at epsilon equals 0 and is not contained in Z of I. The exceptional locus will be in general a complicated singular set, which can be studied by further desingularization of Bi of Cn. But is it possible to describe the geometry of E without doing this? It turns out that, as suggested by Nash, it is enough to study all arcs passing through a point P in E. So, theorems, if P is in this exceptional set, then it is equivalent to the existence of an analytic arc not contained in the zero set, so that lambda of 0 is in Z, and P is equal to the limit of this projectivization of the vector V1 of lambda epsilon, Vn of lambda epsilon. Okay. So maybe here I switch because it's a little bit technical. Now the existence of the limit is equivalent to the existence of a natural number k, so that this is of order epsilon k. And okay, this is great. Okay, so in fact, once we have this description, we are able to prove that when we have this arc, then the number k defined in 12 doesn't depend on the choice of generators of the germ of the ideal. And the nice thing is that we can bound it in general. So what is the meaning for bifurcation theory? So you can think that you look at bifurcation theory with just one parameter. Then you can look at first order, second order, third order. So first order, it's mostly the only case that is considered in the literature. But if you find a situation where what you want to compute at first order is analytically 0, then you can go to second order. And if it is 0 at second order, you can go to third order. But where do you stop? And is there a k where you stop? These technicalities allows you to say, yes, there is a bound. It is bounded. There is a bound. It exists. So it says so that in any case, you will have only to look at finitely many order of the perturbation.
Sorry. Can you go? This is intriguing. I never heard of this. So the bifurcation that you're referring to here is the standard bifurcation that we do, right? Is it the case, or is something different? Is the standard bifurcation theory, right?
Yes, absolutely, yes. It is in fact a bifurcation theory to what bifurcates is that we have a continuous family of periodic orbits, and we perturb, and then we give birth to isolated, some fixed number of isolated periodic orbits.
Isolas of periodic orbits. That's what you mean. Sorry.
Isolas in no, I don't think it is related to what you call isola.
So what is isolate?
No, he said isolated.
Isolated.
Okay, yes.
That means that near the periodic orbit, you have no other periodic orbit.
Right. Oh, but sorry, I want to interrupt you. But is this applicable to other types of bifurcation, not just periodic orbits, like Hopf or something like that?
This is exactly up. At first order, you have both bifurcation,
Yes.
and you can find just one cycle.
Yes.
But in fact, it is a situation which degenerates, so that the quantity that you have in the off bifurcation is equal to 0. So you need to go to another order of perturbation. And then, so the theorem here is that there is always a finite number where you can stop the analysis, and you will get.
But the perturbation that you're doing is in what? In the vector field, directly on the vector field?
Yes.
Never heard this. What's the name of this?
What's the name of this?
I've never seen in any books.
Maybe it was not clearly introduced before our article with Dongmei Xiao and Gavrilov. But in fact, this was there are also very explicit computations made by Iliev, where in fact in all the example he considered, it was finite. It was finite, so that we call this index the Iliev number. And the theorem here is the proof that the Iliev number exists, is bounded.
So you always stop at some point.
Yeah. Yes. At some order. Okay. So here is the theorem. Kamax is SM2. Okay. So I think that I should. Yes, there is also something that I should introduce. So we have this space, Nash space of arcs, which has some structure of pro-algebraic variety, and we are particularly interested in the case arc of the I is the Bottin ideal of some family of vector fields, to the value E, which is the singular fiber. Then, in fact, as every algebraic variety, you have a decomposition in irreducible components. So, in fact, we will say that we have an essential set if it is a reunion of irreducible components. You will see in the example why I use this space of arcs. If we have Pi of M, which is E, and M is minimal under inclusions. Okay, so maybe I switch a little bit and I look at some example. Okay, so let us consider again quadratic centers and what we call Iliev essential perturbations. Okay, so we are back to the notation I started with in some of my lesson. We have a quadratic vector field near a center. So it is conveniently written in complex notation. You see is Soladec idea. So writing with Z is X plus IY, we consider this family. Z dot is I plus lambda Z plus A Z square plus B norm of Z square plus C Z bar square. And ABC are complex coordinates. So the underlying real parameters of the planar vector field is given by this family. So you have a vector field first, which has a stationary point, yes, at 0, 0, because you see this vanish and this vanish when xy is equal to 0, 0. And this is the linear approximation of the vector field. So for lambda equals 0, this is a center. And when lambda is different of 0, if lambda is positive, this is a repulsive, no, an attractive focus. If lambda is negative, it is an unattractive focus. And you have here 6 parameters. Okay, of course, you can go from capital A, B, C to this A, B, C, A prime, B prime, C prime. Okay. Then we have the notion of Bartley ideal that I have already discussed. I have already written this formula. And in fact, it tells you that we have with 4 generators of this, the ideal generated by this V1, V2, V4. The 0 set of the ideal is exactly the center set. So the center set is in this family here, the set of A, B, C, A prime, B prime, C prime, lambda, so that for these special values of the parameters, all orbits are closed in the neighborhood of 0, 0.
You just have one orbit.
No, all orbits are periodic orbits. All.
But I just see one. So you have a family of periodic orbits here.
No, this is a family of vector fields.
Yes, I agree.
When you fix the parameter,
right. You fix the parameter, but you just get one.
You fix the parameters, then you have a fixed portrait, phase portrait.
Exactly.
Okay. Then, in fact, I look at the case where this phase portrait is a center at the origin. So that means it's a field with periodic orbits.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the so-called center set. So in fact, for this family, in fact, I have already explained this. We have the Lotka-Volterra case. Then the reversible case, then the Hamiltonian case, which is well known, of course, and an element, a fourth component, which is called Q4, and which is given by lambda equals 0 and 2 conditions, which are here. Okay. So the above computation goes back essentially to Dulac and Kapteyn, but the usual terminology in the real case, it was introduced by Henrik Zollandek, so I like very much to keep these notations. So it is Hamiltonian, reversible, Lotka-Volterra, and Koni-Munson 4. Okay, and then actually you can make some scaling also, and this is the list of quadratic centers as it looks in the complex notations. So you see this is the Hamiltonian component parameterized by B and C. This is a reversible component parameterized by A and B. This is Lotka-Volterra, this is Koni-Munson 4, and a very special situation where you have Hamiltonian triangle. That means that you have a Lotka-Volterra, but which is also Hamiltonian. Okay. These are the strata of the center set of maximal dimension, and then you have intersection of each strata. and they generate centers. So this is the reversible Hamiltonian, this is the reversible Lotka-Volterra, this is Q4 intersection with reversible, and this is the Hamiltonian triangle, LV intersection H. Okay, and so in fact, the usual theory which was developed was to study the number of limit cycles which can emerge by perturbation of a center. But in fact, we can take, instead of 0, 0, we can take any point in the strata of the center set and make a local analysis around it. So it is relatively easy to get a bound on the number of limit cycles in the strata H and LV. In this case, for instance, Q4, then actually we are not sure to get, the theory is not finished. And also for reversible case, it is still, there are still some parts which are unknown. Okay, what time is it? Okay, we can simplify a little bit the notations because there is this possibility to make a linear transformation of the XY and scalings. And so after this, in fact, we can reduce the number of coefficients of 1 by 1. So this one is now called lambda 1. Here is lambda 2, lambda 3, lambda 4, and lambda 5. Okay. This is a kind of normal form. So it's a little bit dangerous because, in fact, you have problem of actions of a group on some manifold. So we have to be a little bit careful in some examples, but in fact, it's good for the computations. So here are the four ideal which are here. And so we have the ideal. We are able to construct the zero set, it is known. And we can also construct this blow up. And so this will help us to construct all possible bifurcation functions. And as a consequence, bound the number of, bound the EF number at each examples. Okay, so it allows also to construct essential perturbations, which are irreducible components of the corresponding Nash arc space. Okay, so these are the results for the exceptional divisor, and these are the examples for of this essential family of arcs. Here we can take a family. We take a family which is a segment. These are the essential perturbations. And the maximal order of the bifurcation function in that case is 1. So we can proceed for all the components and of higher codimension and higher codimension. Okay, so this is the type of computations that we need. And so maybe I go to some conclusion, and then I go to the next topic. Okay. So to conclude, we resume the main new points of our approach and discuss further possible developments. For instance, to the local Hilbert-16 problem on a period annulus for polynomial perturbations of any degree. So in this article, we have represented the set of bifurcation functions, or which are called also Manicot functions of any order, by the exceptional divisor of the canonical block of the Bottin ideal, and define the corresponding Iliev number, K, in the particular case of the Kapteyn normal form of quadratic deformations. We have checked that this set is always a vector space, or equivalently that E lambda is always a projective space. Is it true for a polynomial perturbation of any degree? So this is not known. Our setting allows a quick and systematic computation of the maximal order of the bifurcation function. But it doesn't provide, of course, a priori information on the number of zeros of this bifurcation function. So many other techniques have been developed for solving this finite step. Finding an explicit integral and an integrating factor for the perturbed center allows to represent the bifurcation function as an iterated integral over the level set of the first integral. This is a subject I talk a little bit about the contribution of Lubomir with iterated integrals. In the known case, this bifurcation function is the solution of a differential system, and techniques like Chebyshev system, argument principle can be used. For instance, this number of limit cycle is 2 for generic perturbations of the Hamiltonian in I3. It is 2 in the perturbation of the generic Lotka-Volterra system, and 3 for the Hamiltonian triangle. For I4, it is known, so this was written at the time it was 8, but now it is 5. It is belong to 3. Okay. The case of a generic reversible center is still open. By our setting, we know that the computation of the first order bifurcation is enough in that case. But there are no easy analysis of the zeros. In view of our computation, we conjecture that if there is a uniform bound on the number of zeros of the bifurcation functions associated to a family of arcs, A, then the number of zeros of the bifurcation functions associated to arcs which belong to the closure A bar of A is also then less than N. For instance, we conjecture that we can obtain a bound for the number of zeros of bifurcation function on I1 intersection I3 by studying only the family which is on the closure. For the Hamiltonian non-generic case, the intersection I2 intersection I3 has been fully covered by many contributions, as well as the intersection I1 intersection I3, and the cyclicity is 2 except for the Hamiltonian triangle. For the generic case, this bound is 2. Heinrich Johanneck conjectured that the maximal number of limit cycles appearing after perturbation of the system with center as a function of a point of the center manifold is equal to the maximum of the values of the number of zeros of bifurcation function in a neighborhood of the point in the center manifold. This conjecture above can be reformulated that this is true in restriction to each component of the Nash space of arcs. Our setting is well adapted also to discuss confluence phenomena. Okay. Maybe I don't explain in details. Okay, so this is as I have maybe I recall the original result of Dulac. I already presented it, maybe with less precision. We consider the set of quadratic planar vector fields, and we suppose that this vector field is real and has a center. In this case, near the center critical point, we have an analytic first integral, which has a Morse critical point. More generally, we say that a complex analytic planar vector field has a Morse critical point, provided that in a neighborhood of some singular point, it has an analytic first integral with Morse critical point. This notion generalizes the notion of center and has a meaning for vector fields with complex coefficients. So the Dirac's theorem classifies complex quadratic vector fields having a Morse critical point. A modern account of this is given in Servo and Alcides Linz-Leto, and we reproduce it here. So given such a center, then there is always a first integral, which is a Darboux polynomial. And that means that you always have polynomials, F1, Fs, so that omega is equal to this product here. This is the integrating factor times the sum of from I, which runs from 1 to S, lambda I, these are complex, these are real coefficients if you are on the real, dfi over fi. So that in fact the first integral is of logarithmic type. F is f1 to the lambda 1, fs to the lambda s, where f1, fs are polynomials. But actually, you can for the special case we are talking of, which is a quadratic planar vector field. In fact, S is equal to 3. So, for instance, you have the Lotka-Volterra case, then it has a first integral. So you have the invariant lines, F1 is equal to 0, F2 equal to 0, F3 equal to 0. Then you have a first integral, which is of the form F1, or yes, F1 lambda 1, F2 lambda 2, F3 lambda 2. In the following, I will discuss a little bit more Lotka-Volterra in some other computation, and maybe I will come back to this these fundamental results of Dulac. Of course, you may have some limits also, and so in fact, taking some limits, you have also maybe some exponential factors. So this is called generalized Darboux. So this is why this theorem of Dulac was very successful at this time, because he looked for a geometric situation, and he discovered that in this geometric situation, all the first integral are Darboux function. Or it was just after Darboux introduced his theory of Darboux functions. So it was perfectly great that, and a bit mysterious, that in this problem, in fact, all the first integrals were of this type. Okay, so maybe I stop here. And there is one subject that I have not discussed, and I have announced, so I will do it by just with the blackboard. So we stop just 5 minutes, maybe to just put the
slides.
I suppress the slide. I will not use the slides in the discussion. So, arrête de partager, c'est ça, non? Oui, c'est ça. C'est très bien. Et là, donc, en fait, Peching voit le...
Et Daisuke.
Ah, il y a Daisuke aussi? Ah bon, d'accord. Très bien. Donc, OK. So, let me take my notes. So this is one of the subjects I announced in this series of lectures. Okay, so in fact, I focus on quadratic planar vector fields. So let me let me write this in this form. Z dot is f of z is q of z plus b of z plus c. So in fact, z for me is a vector x, y, okay? And so this writing is nothing else to say that we consider a quadratic planar vector field and you have a constant C1, C2 plus a linear part xy or B1, B2 of xy. This is the full notation, if you like, plus a quadratic part. Okay, actually, mainly I will be interested in vector fields which have 0, 0 for stationary point, so that we can drop this C. Okay, and I keep this notation. It's more agreeable. So Q has two components, which are actually quadratic forms with value in the vector space, and this is linear. So we are interested in the discretization, possible discretization of quadratic planar vector field. Why? Because, for instance, we are interested in numerical simulations. And there are well-known discretization, like Runge-Kutta, for instance. And I am going to talk about a discretization which has been introduced by Kahn and Kahn realized that this discretization is particularly interesting in general, whatever the dimension, so Z can be Z1, Zn, if you have quadratic vector fields. It was more interesting, and I will show you why.
So it's not general, it's just for quadratic.
No, it's general. It is general, but in fact, it works perfectly well. I will explain why for quadratic vector fields. It has some things.
But it can be applied for other systems.
Yeah.
Beyond IC.
Yes. And in fact, he discussed some examples. So he discussed the Euler top, I think. All these examples I have discussed in my course. So the Euler top and maybe also maybe the Lotka-Volterra system. But okay, and in fact, completely independently, two specialists of solidon theory, Hirota and Kimura. Hirota and Kimura introduced the same. In fact, Kahn did not publish his results in articles, classical articles, and so, and in fact, Hirota and Kimura, they were principally interested in integrable Hamiltonian systems, so that they considered this discretization for seems interesting, particularly interesting for integrable Hamiltonian systems. Okay. So what is this discretization? So I erase this.
So these are recent discretizations, right? These works are recent, 1 year.
So recent. I think this is the 90s. Okay, so what is the? Okay, so I suggest that in this talk we consider this discretization and call it Kahn, Hirota, Kimura, or KHK. So what is the KHK of this vector field? So it is the transformation Z goes to Z prime, or if you like, X, Y goes to X prime, Y prime. Where there is some scale, which we denote as H or epsilon, and it is defined by this relation. So Z prime minus Z over H is Q of Z prime plus 1/2 of B of Z prime plus C. You can forget about the C. So this is the step of the, it is a discretization, so it has a finite step. So H, which is think that it is small. Okay. So this is the definition. So in fact, what is Q of Z prime? So Q of Z prime is associated to this Q. It is sometimes called the polarization. It is 1/2 of Q of Z plus Z prime minus Q of Z minus Q of Z prime. Okay.
The factor that you have there, 1/2. Is it 1/2?
Yes.
1 over epsilon. Ah, okay.
1/2. Yes.
But where does the epsilon comes into play?
This H is also denoted epsilon in the article.
Ah, so you just have one.
The time step.
Okay, you just have
the
one.
Time, the step, the length of the step.
Right. I thought you had two parameters, just But you have only one. Okay.
No, I have only one. Yes. Okay, so in fact, why is it particularly interesting for quadratic vector fields? Well, because in fact, when you compute this, so this is linear. You get something which is linear in Z and Z prime. And this Q, in fact, it is quadratic, but in fact, when you apply when you make the polarization, in fact, you obtain again something which is linear in Z and Z prime. So that after some computation, you recover that it is of the form Z prime minus Z over H is some quantity.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yes.
I think the light is such that the...
No, not on the Zoom.
Okay.
On the Zoom, you see, I can show you the Zoom how you see.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
It's just in this room.
Okay.
In the Zoom, it's fine.
Yes, this is due to this slide.
Yeah.
Yes, by the way, this is quadratic, and this QZ plus Z prime minus QZ minus Q of Z prime is a symmetric bilinear form, which is associated. This is symmetric bilinear form. Transforming to the quadratic form Q. Okay, I use the same symbol for quadratic form. Okay.
What is symmetric bilinear? Is Q, the QZZ. QZ.
Yes, this one.
Okay.
This one. Okay, so that this equation 2 is in fact linear in Z prime. So in the case where you have quadratic vector fields, of course. And in fact, you can check that in some sense, this is a kind of implicit, let's say, implicit, like we have an implicit Runge-Kutta type of.
This is method.
This is an implicit method. But here, in the case, so in general, it is implicit method. But for quadratic vector fields, actually, it can be explicit, provided you inverse some metrics. So in fact, it turns out that Z prime is equal to FH of Z is of the form Z plus H times the identity minus H over 2 the dF of Z inverse times F of Z. So you can check. This is the differential of F of the vector field, the differential of the components of the vector fields. So here you get some matrix. This is a Jacobian matrix of F, if you like. This is the formula. Okay. In fact, it shows that for quadratic vector fields, this discretization is in fact a rational form. It is rational. It is a rational expression. Because this is linear, so this is.
Is that D? Is that the differentiating? This is df?
Yes, df is the Jacobian of f. Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay.
Df is the Jacobian of the vector field.
Right.
Okay, so it looks very nice. And it's even nicer than, than rational, in fact. Because in fact you can reverse the process, and if you reverse the process, then you realize that fh inverse of z is equal to f minus h of z. So in fact it is a rational function, but whose inverse is also a rational function. This is remarkable. So the mapping FH is so let us recall the KFK mapping is a birational mapping. Okay, and now let me add a few references which are quite important. Are you sure that if I write here, it can be? Yes. Okay, so maybe I go there. So one of the reference.
If you want,
there are several references by the way.
Yes, in fact.
Now I can move it up, no?
Yeah,
because yes. Yes.
What you have to do is just disconnect your computer.
Okay. But they will not lose. So I disconnect?
Yes. Now we don't need that.
Okay. Very nice, because I like to get all the backbone to keep all the backbone. So, in fact, there is an important contribution of Elena Celedoni, and she had actually wrote several articles on this topic. Mac, so Elena, maybe with an E. So Mac Baclan. Oren and Quispel. Quispel is quite known for discrete integral systems. Then they proved that the KHK discretization coincide with the Runge-Kutta method. Which that you know certainly, Mathieu. So there is a parameter apparently in Runge-Kutta, and this is a Runge-Kutta of parameter -1. which is usually presented like this. So z prime minus z over h is minus 1/2 f of z plus 2 f of z plus z prime over 2 minus 1/2 of f of z prime. This is the same as KHK. So in fact, it relies with a method which is well used in numerics. Okay. So now we like to look at examples, have some results on examples. So, as I said, Hirota and Kimura applied it, and I did not say before, but Hirota and Kimura applied it to Euler top and Lagrange top. So for the Euler top, it was rather comprehensible, but for the Lagrange top in finality, it was a bit complicated to understand.
So can I ask a question? So what was the motivation to introduce this? What was the motivation to introduce this new type of discretization? Why were they motivated to do this?
Okay, so I think that the example which motivates a lot was Lotka-Volterra, application to Lotka-Volterra. Because in fact, Lotka-Volterra is a very nice example because you have a phase portrait, say, you have three invariant lines, and you have a center.
Yes.
And if you try many methods, discretization methods for Lotka-Volterra, then you never find a center for the discretization. You find a focus, attractive or repulsive. So very surprisingly, when they start to write it for Lotka for
I did not know that. Even for the Runge-Kutta, even if I apply the Runge-Kutta there.
This one is the same as KHK. So in fact,
if I apply that, I should get
you,
the center.
you get a center, and I will prove it. I will prove for you. Yes, yes. So this is one motivation, I think, for.
But if I can apply Runge-Kutta and I get a center, why would I need a new method?
No. But this is Runge-Kutta. It is equivalent when you consider quadratic vector fields. In general, I don't think it is the same. So in fact, this is amazing, but I cannot tell you the motivation of Kahn. Why? I don't know. I don't know enough the subject. So okay, so they have after these three examples, Lotka-Volterra, Euler, and Lagrange. In fact, came the following idea that each time we have an integrable system, then the KHK is integrable. And so the problem is that, in fact, we have several examples where it is true, but there is no general method. So each time you have an integrable system, you have to try to prove that the KHK is integrable in the sense of discrete dynamics. In particular, there is a classical meeting, discrete integrable system, once it was in Paris, and in Paris, Tudor-Ratiu posed this question: is it always true? And then he said we should try the Kowalski top. In fact, it is still unknown if you take the Kowalski top. I think he spoke, sorry, Tudor spoke about two examples. the Kowaitsky top and the Clebsch case of the rigid body in a fluid, in an ideal fluid. In fact, I think Tudor had in mind that we should look at example of algebraically integrable system with where you cannot integrate by elliptic functions. So you go to necessary to genus 2 at least. And in fact, Souris and his coworkers, I will use another important article. Maybe I write it here. So Souris is well known also for discrete integral systems. It's an important article by Marco Petrera. Jennifer Smirin. Yuri Souris. So geometry of the Kahn discretization of planar quadratic Hamiltonian systems. And I have not taken in my note, but I have another reference. So this is for planar quadratic Hamiltonian system. There is another reference of Souris where, in fact, he proved that for the Clebsch case, the discretization for the Clebsch case so in particular for maybe only for Weber case, but okay, maybe for all the Clebsch case, I have to check. So in particular for Weber. The KHK is integrable, and it is not easy at all. Okay, but let us come back at the previous work. So, in fact, in this work, they succeeded to prove the theorem that if we have an integrable for Hamiltonian KHK, so proposition. So it is not, no, it is in this article, I think, proposition. So for Hamiltonian case, KHK has a conserved quantity which I can note like this. So H tilde of X, or yes, of X, so these are the variable x1, xm. No, in cyclic geometry, it's x1, xm, y1, yn. So this is this h tilde is h of x plus little h. So this is this parameter here over 3 h. The gradient of h the transpose of the gradient of h acting on identity minus 1/2 h over 2, sorry, minus h over 2 df x minus, no, df f of x. So there is always a constant quantity.
Next to h of 3 was is written.
Yes. This constant quantity is not Hamiltonian from the vector field itself. And in fact, for instance, if you have h which is polynomial, then actually this Hamiltonian for the KHK is a rational function and rational, and in fact it's inverse. I think it's by rational. Ah, maybe not. No, sorry, it's not good reason. So it is a rational function.
What is h here? Sorry.
H is a step.
No, the capital H.
Ah, the Hamiltonian. So you start with the Hamiltonian
you're right.
equation.
Right.
Okay. Then you discretize. Then the discretization has also a constant quantity. Okay. And there is also a preservation of the measure. So the system has also preserves also some measure. And the measure is in general the volume. Say I have coordinates x1, xn over the determinant of this quantity I minus h over 2 f of x. Okay, so it's quite nice. You cannot apply this to Lotka-Volterra because the Lotka-Volterra is not Hamiltonian. This is why I would like to end this talk with the example of Lotka-Volterra. And this example was treated in a very beautiful article by Sanz Serna. So let me erase this. So important article of Sanz Serna. It was an unconventional symplectic integrator of CAN. I'll explain it today. No, it was 1994. Okay, so we consider the following vector field, which is quadratic vector field. So it is dx over dt is equal to alpha x plus beta xy dy over dt is equal to gamma y plus delta x y. So you see right away that it is quadratic, but also that it preserves the axes x equals 0 and y equal to 0. Okay, and so in fact you can reduce it to the positive quadrants. These are y, x, and we work in restriction to this quadrant. Why do we proceed like this? It is because this is a natural system. It is called Lotka-Volterra. In biology or in chemistry, and in fact, it makes sense to have positive variables. And roughly speaking, an important example is the case where alpha and gamma are positive. So you have no, alpha is positive and gamma is negative. You have prime, which when it is alone is growing exponentially. And if the predator has nothing to eat, then it will decrease exponentially. So it's natural to have alpha positive, gamma negative. And here, something which is negative, because the intersection of the predator and the prey makes that the life is not easy for the prey, and is easier for the predator. Delta is positive. Okay, so this is a natural choice when you speak about ecology or biology to assume, but you can take a priori, I think, in the computation, any alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Okay. No, you cannot. In fact, you put some conditions so that you see, you can look very quickly to the stationary points. So for instance, here you have x equals 0 or alpha plus beta y equals 0. Huh? And here you have y equals 0 and gamma plus delta x equal to 0. And so if you choose well the combination which are here, you may have a point which is on the positive quadrant, and it is a stationary point. So it is possible to check that this is the center, and that you have a picture like this with three invariant lines. So this is usually the situation we refer to with Lotka-Volterra. But let us go to the computation of Saint-Sernin. So he compute immediately the KHK transformation. and it is x1 goes to capital X, capital Y, and we find capital X minus X over H is alpha over 2 X plus X plus beta over 2 X Y plus Y plus X Y Y minus Y over H is gamma over 2 X Y Y plus Y plus delta over 2 X Y plus X Y. Okay. So here in my I denoted alpha negative. Alpha negative. Maybe the pre-predator are put in another side. It's another choice of coordinates. Gamma positive. Okay. Okay, so this is exactly as I said in general. This is a linear in X and Y. And so that, in fact, you can write it in an explicit way. So I hope that I have written it. Not yet, but okay. Maybe I don't need. Okay, so the point is that this is not Hamiltonian. Why? Because in fact, if you take, so this is the first component, this is the second component. So if you compute dp over dx plus dq over dy, what is it? So it is alpha plus beta y minus, plus gamma plus delta x, I think. So in general, this is not, so it's not Hamiltonian. But in fact, since Serna observed that it's not far from being Hamiltonian in the sense, in the following sense. It becomes Hamiltonian in the coordinates psi is logarithm of x, theta is logarithm of y. And in fact, another way to write it is that so you have dx over dt, which is so not Hamiltonian, but it is -1 over sigma h over dx and dy over dt is 1 over sigma h over dx, where h is the conserved quantity. So it's obvious that there is a first integral. So let me explain you why. In fact, let me show you that it is integrable. In fact, yes. In fact, we have dx over dt x equal alpha plus beta 1 and y over y over dt is gamma plus delta x. Okay, and so in fact, let us write the associated foliation. So to do this, we divide this by this, and we have dy over dx is equal.
This computation that you did here?
Yes, it's just to justify that there is a constant of motion. Perhaps I don't need this intermediary step, but in fact, let us write the ratio dy over dx. So this is y times gamma plus delta x divided by x times alpha plus beta y. And so you see that it is the product of a quantity which depends only on y and of a quantity which depends only on x. So immediately you find that it is integral. Okay? So you can write with this integral.
Is that a product? Sorry, I didn't see. So is it y product? I see. Okay, so you
yes.
Yes.
But another way to write this is that it is Hamiltonian for this when you change variable like this, so that in fact it doesn't preserve the symplectic form dx dy, but it preserves the symplectic forms dx dy over the product xy. And in this particular case, I think that the formula I showed you here for the preserved measure gives you exactly this. Okay, so you have a vector field in the plane which has a preserved measure no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You can also show that, in fact, this mapping preserves these two forms, so that you have dx wedge dy over xy is equal to dx wedge dy over capital X, capital Y. And this is what he proves in his article. And so, using the fact that you have an invariant measure, it is not hard to show that, in fact, for this, the transformation will preserve, in fact, we'll have also the transformation will have also invariant curves. So I would say invariant curves. Okay. So you see, this is an interesting subject of study, I think, because the discretization looks very much like an important thing in linear approximation, not linear, in discretization.
What did you write there? So have what? The transformation x, y, have
also have also invariant curves.
Ah, okay, yes. Right.
And this is also a transformation which is interesting for Hamiltonian systems. I recall you that it is still open apparently to if the Kovalevsky top has KHK integrable transformation. The KHK is integrable. I propose we stop now. Okay. Yes, it is almost the end. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me and hearing my talk and all your help for practical things. And thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.